I'm Gerhard Elfers. Welcome to the programme. Europe's top human rights court has ruled in favour of a group of Swiss pensioners who argued their government put them at risk by not doing enough to prevent climate change. It's a landmark decision that could influence legislation across Europe and give a boost to activists who say their governments are failing to tackle climate change.
These women have made climate history. Some 2,500 Swiss pensioners sued their own government because its handling of the climate crisis put their health at risk. The European Human Rights Court in Strasbourg, France, ruled in their favour, a landmark decision cementing the idea that government's climate inaction can violate human rights.
This is the best day.
We're writing history.
The way I understood it, Switzerland has done too little to curb the climate crisis and violated human rights. That's a nice victory.
Some of the applicants used their own medical records to support the case. They said that heat waves, which have become stronger and more frequent with climate change, are especially risky for them as elderly women. 16 of the Grand Chamber's 17 judges voted in favour of the Swiss Women's Association. They concluded that the Swiss government failed to meet emission targets and that it should have examined the association's complaints.
The ruling will be communicated to Switzerland, and it will have certain measures that Switzerland will have to perform to do more.
But the plaintiffs stress the ruling isn't only for their benefit.
We're all affected, not only older women. It's been proven that they're at a greater risk, but it's important that everyone is cared for.
The Swiss Association's case wasn't the only one the court considered today. 6 young people from Portugal sued 32 European countries because increasing climate extremes like the wildfires in Portugal make the planet unlivable for future generations. A former French mayor also sued his own government for not taking significant steps to fight climate change. But the court ruled both cases as inadmissible on procedural grounds. Still, the one win of the day could change the future of climate litigation. It's the first time a powerful court has ruled on climate change, and it could set a precedent.
More and more people are taking their government to court, holding them responsible for their actions. And the results of this can mean in no way that we lean back. This means that we have to fight even more, since this is only the beginning. Because in a climate emergency, everything is at stake.
The effects could be felt in courts across Europe or even the world.
Let's bring in Christina Voigt. She's professor at the University of Oslo, the Department of International Law. Professor, does this ruling now set a precedent for a flood of lawsuits?
Well, formally, it does not set a precedent for any other case, but it is, of course, a very important finding because it's the first authoritative judgment that we have from a supranational court that directly links human rights violations to inefficient or non-ambitious action on climate change.
Now, how will this then affect legal practice across the EU?
Oh, it's a very important indication that governments have to step up their game in order to protect human rights, and governments all over the world and in the EU as well are legally responsible to take appropriate measures to protect human rights. And in order to do so, we are now told they also have to take ambitious climate change action, reducing greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050, having effective measures in place to get there and to ensure that they actually reach that goal. So that link is very important for decision makers, for lawmakers, for implementers, but also for other courts proceedings worldwide. And it can have very important repercussions in other courts, but also other international courts. And there are many proceedings ongoing, which are we're waiting for that judgment from Strasbourg that we have now.
Now let's talk about the 2 other cases that have been dismissed. That seems like a setback for climate activists aiming for stronger government action. How do you see these decisions affecting future legal strategies?
Yeah, well, they were dismissed on procedural grounds, and that does not really come as a surprise. You have to provide proof that you're a victim of a government action, and that, in particular the Portuguese case, that you have exhausted domestic remedies. You have to go to your national courts first, you have to lose there, and then you can go to Strasbourg that's established legal requirements. And it doesn't really come as a surprise that these two other cases, Carême versus France and the Portuguese case, were dismissed. But it's not really a setback, because we do have one case that now gives a very clear indication of who is a victim. That was the Association of Climate Senior Women. And we have, in particular, findings on the merits, on a direct relationship between human rights violations and state actions. So I don't think it is very a setback that the other two cases were ruled out, but there are many more cases to come. There are another 9 cases that are now for the court to decide.
Now, let's look ahead a bit. Do you think that national courts across Europe will play a more prominent role in holding governments accountable?
Most likely. They've already been doing that. We have a whole wave of climate litigation in many countries already ongoing for the last decade or so. But I think that climate litigation based on human rights arguments is something that we probably will see more of, infused by the reasoning from the European Court on Human Rights.
Now, are there any
and
other...
not just in Europe, as I just said, this global phenomenon.
Now, what other legal avenues might be explored by activists?
Well, other legal avenues than courts. I mean, we see, of course, requests to the highest courts in the world. The International Court of Justice, for example, has a request for advisory opinion on states' obligations to protect the climate system. That goes above and beyond human rights. It does include human rights, but also asks about what are fundamental legal obligations under international law to protect the climate system. For example, under the law of the sea or the United Nations Charter. So these are undecided questions which are now put to the highest court in the world. But I'm also sure that the International Court of Justice will have a good reading through what came out of Strasbourg today.
Thank you very much, Christina Voigt, law professor at the University of Oslo.
You're welcome.
And we can now talk to Elisabeth Stern. She is a board member of Swiss Senior Women for Climate Protection, the group that filed the complaint and won in court today. She joins us from Zurich. Elisabeth, were you expecting this result?
Well, were we expecting? You always hope that it will be a very good result, but could we really expect it? I just noticed that it took me a while to register what was happening today. Because when you listen to the reading of the judgment, there is one point, next point, next point, next point. And then I began to wonder, did I understand everything correctly? And, oh yeah, my English actually should be good enough. I hope I did understand correctly. But it took me a while until the penny dropped. And then I thought, yeah, I guess somehow we did expect it. But it's just a wonderful moment. It's just incredible after 8 years to have a final judgment.
I can imagine that. You just mentioned the 8 years. Describe this journey for us to get to this point.
Well, it was a long journey, and nobody can say that we were not really patient. We were, because we had to go through all the institutions within our country. You have to do that. You have to exhaust the national possibilities. So all 3 courts actually dismissed us, and on reasons that were somewhat hard for me to understand, to follow, to sort of. And this time I really hope that whatever the judgment would be, we would get very good reasonings for it, and not like I would have to feel like an idiot afterwards because somebody was just giving me some explanation. And so this is just the best we could expect. And of course, at the same time, I did really feel sorry for the young Portuguese who lost their case.
You mentioned the young Portuguese claimants there. Do you hope that your actions can inspire others to do the same, young people in particular?
Well, that's what we hope, that we are somewhat more than a ripple in a pond, and that it does help any future generations, let's put it that way. And that chap, the Portuguese children, they were so generous in saying that you won, that means you also won for us. So in that sense, yes, we do hope it has reverberations to other groups, and that there are those who have the courage to take it up, like we already know from other countries that they actually do that. And we were inspired by someone else, so I hope we are going to be an inspiration to some other groups.
And just briefly, to come back to the core of this, what do you expect your government now to do?
Well, I would imagine right now our government is not too happy because they really get a lot of work. And they have so far, just today, actually reacted very well by saying, yes, we have to. Well, they didn't put it exactly that way. These are now my words. We are going to do our homework now. And we will see. We will see, and they can be sure that we watch them.
Thank you very much, Elisabeth Stern there, from the Swiss Senior Women for Climate Protection. Thank you.
Thank you.